This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
China and Italy mark 50 years of bilateral ties, vow to forge closer cooperation. Sudan's Prime Minister Hamdok discusses a terror list removal with Mike Pompeo. And the World Health Organization declares the African continent polio-free. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Also ahead this hour. In business news, Mobicel empowers black women in new South African plant. And in your sport, candidates begin filling nomination papers for delayed Kenya Football Federation elections. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi has begun a 5-nation European tour, stopping first in Italy. The first visit comes exactly 50 years to the day since the two countries established formal ties, and both sides say there's more room to grow. Tony Waterman reports from Rome.
The elbow bump may be the new handshake, but the messaging is the same. Let's make a deal. On his first overseas trip since the pandemic outbreak, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi said the Beijing-Rome relationship has not only withstood the test of coronavirus, but it brought them closer together. And now is the time to capitalize on that newfound strength.
China is willing to cooperate with Italy in economic areas that have been boosted by the pandemic, including e-commerce, digital technologies, green economy, and health, to open a new chapter of cooperation. China is the world's second-largest economy. Italy is a major economic powerhouse in agriculture, manufacturing, and innovation. If we combine our advantages and fully tap into our potential, mutually beneficial cooperation will be achieved.
It's no coincidence that Wang chose Italy as the first stop on his European tour. The two countries have deep economic ties, bilateral relations that stretch back 50 years. And in 2019, Italy became the first G7 nation to sign on to China's Belt and Road Initiative. Speaking at a press conference, Italy's Foreign Minister Luigi Di Maio called China an indispensable partner. But solidifying ties with Italy comes as Brussels takes a tougher stance on Beijing, clamping down on state subsidies to corporations and expressing, quote, grave concerns over a new security law in Hong Kong. Minister Wang's European tour also comes just weeks after U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo visited Europe, trying to build Western pressure on China and convince U.S. allies to ban Chinese technology from their 5G rollout plans. Minister Wang said relations with the EU are positive, but are also being damaged by external forces, without identifying what or who those forces are. He made clear, though, that a Cold War must be averted, a sentiment shared by his Italian counterpart.
Our geopolitical stance has been unchanged. Italy has long been the bridge between the East and the West. We respect the stances of our allies. Our foreign policy is unique. China and Italy are marking the 50th anniversary of diplomatic ties. Our cooperation with China is not new, and we believe our relations will keep developing in the future.
Italy is the first stop on a 5-nation European tour, and Minister Wang will also travel to the Netherlands, Norway, France, and Germany, where he's expected to meet with the Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte and also the French President Emmanuel Macron. Now, this trip is meant to consolidate and reinforce China-EU relations, laying the groundwork for a future partnership post-pandemic. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Rome.
Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has urged Canada to remove the main obstacles in boosting bilateral relations. He made the comment in a meeting with his Canadian counterpart, François-Philippe Champagne, in Rome. Wang Yi said Canada's detention of Huawei chief financial officer for no reason has caused serious difficulties in expanding bilateral ties. His comments come after a Canadian court blocked Meng Wangshu's request for the release of more documents related to her arrest in 2018. Champagne said Canada will solve problems in order to boost bilateral relations. He also asked for the release of 2 Canadians arrested by China. Beijing has charged Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavov with spying. Here is a response from the Chinese Foreign Ministry.
康明凯、迈克尔涉嫌从事危害中国安全的。
The arrested Canadians are suspected of sabotaging China's national security, and Chinese judiciary authorities are making sure that their legitimate rights are respected. We urge Canada to respect China's judicial sovereignty. China is not responsible for the difficulties in bilateral ties. We urge Canada to correct their mistakes and create the conditions necessary for relations to go back to normal.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has met with Sudanese Prime Minister Abdalla Hamdok. Pompeo was in Sudan for an official visit. Sudan is currently listed by the United States as a state sponsor of terrorism. During their meeting, the Sudanese Prime Minister discussed removing his country from Washington's terrorism list. The 2 sides also discussed Sudan's deepening relations with Israel. Pompeo has been on a regional tour following the UAE and Israel signing an accord to open diplomatic relations. However, Prime Minister Hamdok explained the transitional government does not have the mandate to normalize ties with Israel. Well, let's get more on these developments, and I'm joined by Sarah Kira. She's a political analyst and director of the European and North Africa Center for Research in Egypt. Thank you for joining us, Sarah. So why is this issue of Sudan normalizing ties with Israel so important?
The issue of normalizing the Sudanese-Israeli relations now is important for Sudan and is an important step for reintegrating Sudan and reintegrating Sudan in the international community, especially with U.S. And as we know, the U.S.-Israeli relations with one of the troubled countries in the region are always aligned. So to have to be back on track for Sudan with its relations with the U.S., it has to have relations with Israel as well, because they are usually aligned, those relations.
So this is about reintegrating Sudan into the international community. How could Sudan-Israel relations, though, affect the removal of Sudan from a U.S. state sponsors of terrorism list?
It seems to be one of the main conditions, the main U.S. conditions, to have Sudan opening up to Israel in order to be lifted from the U.S. State sponsoring terrorism list, and to have, it's very important for Sudan now, Sudan is in no position of renegotiating this, because it really needs to have the sanctions lifted and to be open up again to the region and the world.
So how important is that removal, though, of Sudan from the terrorism list?
It's important for the transitional period that Sudan is facing right now. Like, Sudan has no other option, because it needs to have an economic boost, and it needs to be reintegrated in the international community, as mentioned, and it needs to have the sanctions lifted by being lifted from the U.S. state terrorism sponsorship list, and it needs that for the sake of its own people right now, and for the sake of having a successful democratic transitional period, and to have an economic boost for the Sudanese as a state, for Sudan as a state, and for the Sudanese people.
All right, Sarah Kira joining us there from Cairo. Thank you. The World Health Organization has declared Africa polio-free. The achievement comes after decades of mass immunization and education campaigns. CGTN's Jen Keo reports.
The month of August is a historic month for the African continent. After 4 years of no single case of wild polio, the World Health Organization has declared Africa polio-free.
My message is to tell families that the eradication of polio does not mean that we stop immunizing children.
Poliovirus now joins smallpox on the list of viruses that have been wiped out in Africa. WHO says poliomyelitis eradication efforts have prevented up to 1.8 million children from crippling lifelong paralysis and saved approximately 180,000 lives since 1996.
We really have to work hand in hand with the population so that these vaccination activities can continue.
Poliovirus is spread in the feces of an infected person and is picked up through contaminated food or water. The acutely infectious and contagious virus attacks the spinal cord and causes irreversible paralysis in children. Vaccinating people breaks the cycle of transmission and eventually eradicates the virus. The last case of polio in Africa was detected in 2016 in Nigeria. Vaccination in the West African country has been violently opposed by jihadists who claim it's a plot to sterilize Muslims. The WHO, however, says it will ensure that Africa is shielded from any polio cases by continuing with its vaccination campaigns. Jane Kale, CGTN.
Well, let's cross over to Deji Badmus. He's in Lagos for us with more on this. Deji, it's a momentous time as well for Nigeria regarding this WHO Wild Polio Declaration. So the WHO Wild Polio Free Declaration for its Africa region comes after Nigeria did it. So how did Nigeria do that?
Well, Beatrice, it wasn't an easy thing at all. And Jane Q actually alluded to some of the challenges Nigeria actually went through in her piece there. For instance, in Kano State, in northern Nigeria, especially in most parts of the north now, there was a problem there in 2003. The polio vaccination there was suspended because, of course, as Jane said, some religious and traditional leaders now believed that it was a ploy to sterilize some young girls. And of course, there is a background to that because sometime in 1996 or thereabout, there was a drug trial now by Pfizer that didn't go well, and a lot of children in the north actually died. So that created that suspicion, and that's the reason why. That's actually what led to the boycott now in 2003. Of course, it resumed in 2004, but then didn't actually go well. I mean, we saw a series of problems. There was a case, for instance, in Kano State, that's in northwest Nigeria, where about 9 vaccinators were actually killed just because they were carrying out their duties. So it was really tough getting a vaccination done, especially in the north of the country, not so in the south, but eventually. And then the Boko Haram insurgency in the northeast also added to compounded the problem. And that's the reason why in 2016 you saw that outbreak that actually slowed down this declaration of polio-free status for Nigeria, because there was an outbreak in Borno State, and the reason was because polio vaccinators could not access some of these conflict zones. But eventually the country was able to overcome the problem, and it's the reason why today Africa and Nigeria has been declared polio-free, because from 2016, after that incident, there had been no reported case of polio at all.
So the question now, though, Deji, is about sustainability and keeping the polio at bay. It does still exist in countries like Afghanistan and Pakistan. So how is Nigeria and the rest of Africa prepared to maintain and finally win that polio battle?
Well, it's going to be very tough, no doubt at all. Experts have said it, and it's just the way it is. What has happened now is that essentially we've won the battle, but we've not won the war. Not until polio is eradicated in those 2 countries you mentioned, Pakistan and Afghanistan, then there are chances that we could have imported cases, not just in Nigeria, but anywhere else in Africa. But let's take a look at this report now, where I have more details. 35-year-old Esther Makwe is a polio survivor. The Nigerian entrepreneur was infected with the virus at age 2.
People were afraid of coming close to me, and the stigma and it was so much on me that I had to run. Initially, I was like blaming my mom because I asked her a lot of questions, and she told me actually there was a vaccine she missed.
Makop Masok, another polio survivor, has a similar experience. He says his childhood was a very difficult one.
You know, there's what is called the post-polio trauma that a lot of people don't know. Sometimes in the night you feel pains. Everybody is enjoying his rest. You are just feeling pains in your joints.
Their stories are a reminder of the debilitating effects of poliomyelitis. Less than a decade ago, the country accounted for more than half of global polio cases.
Just think about in 1996, almost 75,000 children were paralyzed in Africa. So now there is no polio case, there is no paralysis due to polio. So this has been a historic pathway. You see how many disability you reversed. And also, we did not count the polio-related mortality, so we saved lives. So you see that has a direct impact to the economy.
Nigeria reported its last case of polio in 2016. The WHO has now certified the country and the continent free of the virus. And for polio survivors like Esther and Makop, this means a lot.
If only this was done earlier, I think I wouldn't have been affected. And I'm very happy that the children I will bring on earth, nothing like polio.
It's even my prayer that it will be sustained, it will be permanent, that no child in Nigeria, Africa, or even the world will be infected with polio any longer.
But experts say much still needs to be done to ensure Africa stays free of the wild polio virus.
Nigeria is having very high number of unimmunized children. So we need to ensure those unimmunized children are immunized through the routine immunization system. And building that system, that also build the backbone for primary healthcare system. And that will be the major challenge ahead of us.
While Africa is celebrating this health milestone, the world is not rid of the wild polio virus yet, as Pakistan and Afghanistan are still battling with the virus. The WHO estimates that the eradication of polio across the world would save at least $40 billion, which can then be diverted to other public health initiatives. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria. So it's pretty obvious that there's still much work to be done, as that expert said in that piece, and surveillance, of course, is key, and then continued immunization. Then in the case of Nigeria, this number of unimmunized children, well, that number has to come down. If Nigeria and Africa is able or are able now to maintain all of this now, especially in terms of surveillance and continued immunization, then we would succeed in keeping this disease at bay until it is eventually wiped out in Afghanistan and Pakistan. Back to you, Beatrice.
All right, Deji Badmos for us there in Lagos. Thank you. Hundreds of Libyans have taken to the streets of the capital, Tripoli, for the third consecutive day. Protesters have been marching against worsening living conditions and corruption. That's even after Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj announced a cabinet reshuffle on Monday. In a televised conference, Sarraj said he is determined to end graft. He also said he backs the legitimate right of Libyans to protest. The North African nation has been in turmoil since 2011 after the ousting of former leader Muammar Gaddafi. Today, two factions fight for control of Libya: the UN-backed government in the west and the Libyan National Army in the east. The conflict-weary nation has been facing water and power shortages amid soaring summer temperatures. The situation has been worsened by the coronavirus pandemic.
There's no electricity, no water, the cost of living is high, there are no salaries, but there are intruders in our country because members of the former regime and Haftar's henchmen are present in all institutions.
Today we called for the reform and improvement of the living conditions of the Libyan people, the cleansing of government institutions from the corrupted, as well as the expulsion of the Wagner Group mercenaries from the oil fields and the expulsion of all mercenaries in Libya.
A video is going viral in the United States showing Black Lives Matter protesters in Washington, D.C. confronting restaurant customers. The clip shows activists gathering around a customer seated outside who refused to show support for the group. The woman later told the Washington Post that she felt under attack. The protesters chanted, "White silence is violence." Demonstrations have erupted in the United States Capitol after the police shooting in Wisconsin. And there's been a third night of violent protests in Wisconsin, with people angry over the police shooting of an unarmed black man over the weekend. Shot multiple times in the back, Jacob Blake remains hospitalized in serious condition. Dan Williams reports.
It was an emotional day in Kenosha as Jacob Blake's family attended a news conference here just outside the courthouse. They had come from the hospital to give thanks to their supporters and well-wishers following the shooting on Sunday that saw police officers shoot Blake several times in the back. The message from the family was clear: they want justice. His father, Jacob Blake Sr., was clearly overcome with emotion.
They shot my son 7 times. 7 times. Like he didn't matter. But my son matters.
Blake's mother, Julia Jackson, also spoke. She too called for justice, but she also had this message for protesters.
As I was riding through here, through the city, I noticed a lot of damage. It doesn't reflect my son or my family. If Jacob knew what was going on as far as that goes, the violence and the destruction, he would be very unpleased.
Blake remains hospitalized and in a serious condition. Attorney Ben Crump says Blake is paralyzed and still faces a significant fight for his life.
The medical diagnosis right now is that he is paralyzed. And because those bullets severed his spinal cord and shattered some of his vertebrae, it is going to take a miracle for Jacob Blake Jr. to ever walk again.
Authorities say the investigation is still ongoing. 2 officers have been placed on administrative leave. Dan Williams for CGTN, Kenosha, Wisconsin.
You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. China's First Lady donates medical equipment to Côte d'Ivoire. And Ghanaian innovator develops a real-time COVID-19 tracker.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself. If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
To South Africa now, where engineers have developed a 3D printed ventilator that can assist multiple COVID-19 patients at once. The ventilator is portable and allows for off-grid operations for up to 1.5 hours. CGTN's Lisan Jamela tells us more.
South Africans continue to innovate new products to curb the spread of the coronavirus, and the University of Johannesburg is at the forefront in terms of those innovations to fight this coronavirus. In April, the Institution of Higher Learning created open-source cheap ventilators to help fight the COVID-19 pandemic. During the same month, UJ developed 3D printed surgical face shields in an effort to meet the rapidly growing need for personal protective equipment for healthcare workers. And now, the university has developed 3D ventilators. The ventilators have a customizable base plate to treat multiple patients. Named Ora Imprimere, meaning a breeze of air provided by printing. The ventilators have a battery system that will ensure normal functioning, whilst the demand for electricity currently exceeds the available supply here in South Africa.
Well, what we did is that the base plate was 3D printed using a material called PLA,
And the 3D printer concept is basically coming from the Lego design concept. And from, with the Lego design, what you can have is that you can have multiple components that will be able to put in a second additional ambu bag. South Africa has a problem of power outages and what is called blackouts. So one of our undergrad students, Mr. Malcolm Lowe, suggested that we use lithium-ion batteries as part of this design. So what we did there is to superimpose lithium-ion batteries into the design so that it can last for 1.5 hours without the need of an electrical grid connection.
An ambu bag is a handheld device commonly used to provide positive pressure ventilation to patients who are not breathing or not breathing adequately.
The ambu bag is centered with these locks, and these locks make sure that the ambu bag does not move and always keep its center. They can be adjusted to any bag size.
The team also ensured that there is a solar mobile lab to enable continual use of the devices.
The ventilator we designed uses DC power source, but we have a converter unit that can convert from AC to DC. But the interesting thing about our project is just beside the ventilator, we also have a solar mobile lab that can ensure that once the battery runs out, the solar-powered system can continuously provide electricity to the ventilator. So you can have a 24 hours a day energy from the solar system based on the trailer that is attached to it. Yeah.
The UJ engineering team has also made the blueprint available to the public in order to develop the design further. Yulisan Jamila for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
A Ghanaian innovator has developed a real-time tracker of confirmed COVID-19 infections across Africa. The app was initially designed to bridge the information gap during the early stages of the pandemic on the continent. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai caught up with the innovator in Accra.
When Ghana recorded its first case of the coronavirus in March, Darlington Akogo and his team developed a dashboard to trace its spread across Africa. It was aimed at helping governments make informed decisions on how to fight the virus.
We had thousands of people visit this platform, and beyond just showing the number, we did a lot of analysis to show you that, okay, how does Africa compare to other parts of the world? Then eventually the countries themselves started taking responsibility for this, so they started producing their own dashboard. And the person that is supposed to be responsible for producing this across Africa is either the WHO offices for Africa or CDC, Africa CDC. So eventually they did this.
With the World Health Organization and Africa Centers for Disease Control COVID-19 dashboards in place, his team had to up its game. They are now using the data to predict how the infections could spread in the future as Ghana and other African countries plan to reopen their borders.
Should we decide to open the borders, it shouldn't just be based on past data. You should be able to predict what happens if you do open the borders. And that is what we are trying to work on, our predictive modeling. So anytime you want to take a decision, you run models, you run simulations and see how would it play out if you take this decision. So that will either advise you to either open borders or not to open borders. Or even more specifically, if you do decide to open borders, open them in a very, very specific way.
The team is also developing artificial intelligence solutions to detect abnormalities related to COVID-19 from medical images such as chest x-rays.
Darlington says he is now partnering other organizations from across Africa to collect data for real-time analysis of the spread of COVID-19. He hopes the results from this can help governments fight the virus effectively.
But a funding gap has stalled the process of work as he mainly relies on grants from external sources and is yet to get financial support from the government. As Africa's COVID-19 infections surpass 1 million, Darlington says more analysis is needed to track the cases in order to know what needs to be done to stop the spread. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
Mauritius is among a handful of countries to have contained the COVID-19 pandemic. So far, the island nation has recorded fewer than 350 cases. Ash Chatal has more.
Since April 26, Mauritius has not recorded a case of locally transmitted COVID-19. The densely populated island nation is among the few to contain the spread of the coronavirus.
You know, since the beginning of the outbreak in China in January, we started working here. Around 15th or 16th of January, we had already made plans what to do. We had already started sensitizing the population through TV, radio, written press, so pamphlets, posters, sensitizing the whole population about the symptoms and signs of COVID, the preventive measures they should take, and what to do if they feel that they got the problem. This was going on almost every day to make sure that it goes in the mind of the people.
The country also drew from its experience combating dengue and measles outbreaks.
We had contact tracing since long. For dengue, for measles outbreak, for all that, we do have contact tracing. But this one was different. This one was a disease which was spreading very fast. And we know from experience from different countries, the number of people having serious cases, number of people dying, etc. So what we did is from the beginning only, we increased the number of contact tracing teams. And we monitored the teams every day.
With the support of the World Health Organization, the government strengthened measures like contact tracing.
We started by the elaboration of National Action Plan for Preparedness and Response of the Outbreak. And this was done with the support of WHO. And this action plan took into account the 9 pillars recommended by WHO.
The country, with the aid of the WHO, also made sure to procure essential response supplies and increase testing capacities. Astatal, CGTN.
Meanwhile, Chinese First Lady Peng Liyuan has donated medical equipment to Côte d'Ivoire. The supplies are aimed at helping women and children fight COVID-19. The donation has been received by representatives of the Ivorian First Lady Dominique Ouattara in Abidjan. CGTN's Wanja Mungai with the story.
It is yet another donation from China. It aims at helping Africans fight COVID-19. Representatives of Côte d'Ivoire's First Lady, Dominique Ouattara, receive over 100 thermometers and 18,000 surgical masks.
I would like to thank the First Lady of China for giving us this important batch of medical devices. This donation will be used to help people who do not have the means to better protect themselves from the virus. It is true that we need a lot of medical equipment, and this donation is very welcome.
Authorities say the contribution to women will go a long way in flattening the curve in the West African nation.
This batch of medical equipment, which constitutes an important contribution to the efforts that the First Lady of China is constantly deploying, comes to the relief of women, children and teenagers of Côte d'Ivoire within the framework of the fight that we all lead against the pandemic of COVID-19.
The Organization of African First Ladies for Development appealed to Peng Liyuan to assist Africa's vulnerable during the pandemic.
After receiving the request from Mrs. Sassou Nguesso, Mrs. Peng Liyuan responded favorably within a short period of time. The First Lady said the Chinese government would make donations to 53 African countries that have diplomatic relations with China. I hope this donation will help women, children and teenagers better cope with the pandemic.
China has been making contributions towards the fight against COVID-19 across the continent. China's ambassador says the country is committed to prioritize Africa once the vaccine is developed. Wanja Mungai, CGTN.
You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. Mobicel empowers black women in a new South African plant. And Nigeria faces severe forex shortage over plunging oil prices.
Vikash Purma is a scuba diving instructor on the island of Mauritius.
When you go underwater, you are living the actual moment. Because when you're down there, you're not in contact with whatever trouble you've got, whatever is there.
He is a popular teacher with locals, as well as with international visitors. For Vikash, the underwater world is a place where everyone is equal. Yet he finds that society itself is not always perfect.
No one is better than A, B, or C.
I don't say that's one. I say that's the reality.
Well, let's take a look at the business environment in South Africa, where the cell phone maker Mobicel has set up a new assembly plant. The facility is in Johannesburg, and it will allow the firm to grow its market share in the country. Here's CGTN's Sumitra Naidu.
Mobicel is not only investing in its growth and expansion, it also wants to create much-needed employment in South Africa. This new state-of-the-art end-to-end facility will focus on employing young black women.
So at the time of the COVID hitting, we started to notice even more women were really impacted by this. In the tech and the manufacturing industry, just in general, there's not much women employment. And we all understand that the challenges that our ladies face in the job market. We saw this as the perfect opportunity to actually address this. It was a time when a lot of business was closing down. It was a lot of people were losing jobs. But we wanted to actually flip the whole script on its head and go for something more special.
Young women are put through an extensive 3-week training and induction program. Their only requirement is a matric certificate.
So it's not about us looking at a CV and saying, this candidate ticks the boxes, they are now suitable, let's hire. There's so many women out here in South Africa that are passionate and ambitious, but they need this opportunity. And because we are able to train, because we are able to bring them in and equip them with all the skills, we saw this as a great opportunity to make a hard call and say that our new assembly plant is going to be run fully by a woman and black South African women.
For these ladies, it's not only a job, it's an opportunity to acquire skills that can empower them for the future.
When I came here, you're inexperienced, like you have no idea what you're going to do. And this opens the door for you to be like a qualified technician, and working by a place where it's permanently, that's a blessing, because a lot of girls my age, that's struggling to get a job because you just matriculated and you don't have experience.
This is, well, a great opportunity whereby, now I don't even have to ask. Now I can help myself out. If I could say that, I came here as everybody, but when time went by, I got promoted, and so I believe that I can still grow within this. This is just not opportunity. I feel like we're still gonna grow.
Mobicel has already hired and trained 65 ladies in this assembly plant. The company is planning on employing an additional 50 women over the next few months. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Nigeria is facing a severe foreign currency shortage following the collapse in the price of its main export crude oil. The country's long-held multiple exchange rates and capital controls have compounded the problem as firms and foreign investors find it increasingly difficult to buy US dollars with ease or even more capital out of the country. As CGTN's Deji Badmus reports, there are growing fears that this forex shortage could limit the recovery of Africa's biggest oil producer.
The last time Nigeria experienced the current forex liquidity shortage was in 2016, when the country slipped into recession. With another recession looming, the problem has resurfaced, and the course is not uniquely different from the last time. A fall in oil price, the country's main source of forex earnings, and a drop in remittances flow as a result of global disruptions from the COVID-19 pandemic have both combined to hurt the country's forex revenue. Even foreign investments, too, have been greatly impacted.
The focus in Nigeria, unfortunately, has been with the portfolio investors. And they come in and out, and when the conditions are good, they're in. When the conditions are bad, they're out. But FDI is more calculated, is more focused on the long-term economic growth and development. And clearly, Nigeria is probably doing under $2 billion a year in FDIs.
Nigeria's capital market has been badly hit as a result of the situation, as foreign portfolio investors bid for the gates, seeking alternative markets.
For most of the foreign investors bought the FMDQ OTC futures contract, FX futures contract rather, and it's a Naira non-deliverable forward that they get Naira and they still have to source for their dollars. So what we've been seeing now is that for most of the foreign investors, despite the assurances from the CBN, for most of them have not been able to repatriate their proceeds.
The Central Bank of Nigeria has so far carried out 2 rounds of devaluation as part of its strategy to ease the pressure on the local currency and bring about a single exchange rate for the country. It also added some new items on its list of items banned from accessing forex through the official market. Even banks too have had to ration the sale of forex and review spending limits of customers. But the scarcity still persists, and some analysts say the situation could go on for the next 18 months if oil prices continue to remain low.
So at the point when oil prices are over $100 a barrel, then you should see the Naira appreciate against the dollar. And at a time when oil prices are low, you should see the Naira devalued. But basically, because you have a static exchange rate regime, we've suffered devaluation and we're not seeing that revaluation.
We need to ensure that our foreign exchange policy incentivizes investment, allows or encourages inflow of foreign capital and foreign direct investment. We need to remove the current level of uncertainty around a lot of policy issues.
The National Bureau of Statistics here has just released the GDP figures of the country for the second quarter. Not surprisingly, the economy contracted by 6%, even though oil continues to account for around 9% of the entire GDP. Fact is, if prices do not go up, the entire economy will continue to feel the shock. And of course, the forex challenge will continue to bite harder. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
At around 1,000 acres, over 90% of Egypt's jasmine fields are located in the Garbiya Governorate. The fields are fed by the mineral-rich waters of the Nile shortly before the river reaches the Mediterranean Sea. The country's jasmine farmers pick about 20 tons of the scented plant each day. CGTN's Alexandria Majala has the rest of that story.
Egypt's Garbiya region is the heartland of its jasmine harvest. According to international trade figures, the aromatic oils extracted for perfumes from here make up over half of the global supply.
We learned to harvest since we were young, and this profession needs attention and quick hands because we only reap the small blooming flowers.
During the harvest season, picking begins around midnight and ends a few hours after dawn each day. A tough job, but a hard-working picker can harvest as much as 5 kilograms or 11 pounds of petals a day. While it is cooler to work after dark, the key reason harvesting is done at night is because it is only then that the flowers fully open.
Egypt's jasmine production in the season, which starts in June until November, is around 5 tons of jasmine.
According to the International Federation of Essential Oils and Aroma Trades, Egypt and India dominate the production of jasmine extract for perfumes, making up around 95% of supply. Jasmine trade is estimated to pull in some $6.5 million annually for Egypt, providing income to around 50,000 people.
There are some competitors to Egypt in jasmine production, such as India and Tunisia. That's why we are trying to produce the best quality we have.
The Fakhri Essential Oils factory handles around 70% of the region's floral production. They compress and grind the delicate blossoms down. From that paste, the precious scented oils can be extracted by distillation. From all those flowers, some 5 tons of dense jasmine paste is finally produced each year. Egyptian farmers have long complained that the low production costs of their big rival India drive their prices down. But the economic impact of the novel coronavirus pandemic has been harder still, with demand dropping sharply. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
And we still have more news for you here on the program. Here's what's ahead. We get up close with the white rhino bulls at the Mara in our digital safari.
the greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Canada, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
And now to our continuing digital safari series. Today we take a look at how two white rhino bulls are hanging around a female in the hope of catching her in estrus. The female's calf is not impressed and occasionally charges at the bulls.
Yesterday on CGTN's Digital Safari. In the Masai Mara, our morning started off with a bang. David found a clan of hyenas devouring a recently killed zebra. Wary of other predators, the clan did not waste time in finishing the carcass. Some of them stole fleshy chunks for later. Further south in Pride Lands, the atmosphere was a lot more relaxed. As a couple of hyena cubs took a nap on the road, worn out from the night before. Over in Pinda, two white rhino bulls were mingling with a female, hoping to catch her in estrus. But her calf was not in the mood to share. Nearby, Deval tracked down a herd of grazing buffalo. While these burly beasts were filling their stomachs, numerous oxpeckers were getting their fill as well. Meanwhile, in Juma, a lone buffalo decided to become a member of a new herd. Despite all their differences, these elephants welcomed their new herd mate with a pleasant reception. Elsewhere in Juma, Steve found a lone elephant bull, giving himself a dust bath and carefully digging for some nutritious roots. At Ndlovu Dam in Pride Lands, another herd of elephant took the opportunity to cake themselves in mud. The youngsters amused themselves on the water's edge and frolicked in the mud, while Mom watched carefully, ready to lend a helping trunk. Some nearby warthogs saw an opening to get involved in the muddy antics, even if some of the elephants objected to them being there. Join us every day at 4:30 GMT on CGTN digital platforms for your very own virtual safari through the African wild.
And your sports news coming up next. Here's what's ahead. Candidates begin filling nomination papers for delayed Kenya Football Federation elections.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
And we start your sport with the delayed football elections in Kenya, which have been postponed twice already. The Electoral Board, mandated to conduct the exercise, has started receiving nomination forms from aspirants seeking elective positions at the county levels. Those seeking posts in the National Executive Committee will submit their papers by the 31st of August. This comes amid claims that the list of clubs and delegates eligible to vote in the Football Kenya Federation elections is defective. Some candidates eyeing the presidency claimed the Electoral Board cannot conduct credible elections. Despite the world body FIFA urging the polls to be held, the Sports Disputes Tribunal is still deciding whether to hold the exercise for a third time. The FKF Electoral Board has scheduled the 19th of September and the 17th of October as dates for county and national elections, respectively.
I hope things will be okay. I'm looking at FKF as an eye of football in Kenya, and we should support the federation because performance is not a preserve of Nick Mwandwa, but efforts made in the grassroots. If there's good leadership at the grassroots, things will improve because of the cooperation between FKF and those who are seeking elective posts, and we are vying for a reason.
To Spain now, where the arguably greatest player of all time, Lionel Messi, has told Barcelona he wants to leave the club immediately. Sources say the club received a note from Messi's lawyers declaring that the Argentine, who has spent his entire career at Barcelona, wishes to leave. The club subsequently responded to Messi, stating they wanted him to stay and finish his career at the Catalan Giants. A second source added that the fax Messi's lawyers sent referred to a clause in the last contract the Argentine striker signed in 2017, which allowed him to leave for free, a clause that expired on the 10th of June this year.